name is Ugodre, and welcome to, should I call this a new show, a new presentation? Okay, so we just call it Facts Behind the Figures. Yeah, Fact Behind the Figures. I'm going to be doing this maybe once every week or every 2 weeks, depending on how, the kind of response that I get from you guys. All right, so in these sessions, I'm just going to be, looking at some numbers, macroeconomic data, financial data, and just try to make sense of some of it for you. Try as much as possible to make this brief. Let me see if I can time myself. All right, so try to make this, see if we can keep this under 20 minutes. 20 minutes is an awful long time though, but let's move on. All right, so if you guys noticed, exchange rate has been haywire over the last few weeks. It's crossed 550 to the dollar. Like, if you have been sleeping for some days and you're just finding out, yes, 550 to the dollar. And a lot of people are panicking. It's pretty obvious now that any business that requires some kind of import into this country is going to find it hard to survive with this kind of rate, because people just won't be able to afford it, right? So it's looking like businesses that have some kind of local substitute are the ones that might benefit at the end of the day, because it's looking more expensive, increasingly more expensive to buy imported stuff compared to locally made ones. So today I'm just going to take you through what Nigeria imports, and this is based on the foreign trade data that the National Bureau of Statistics publishes every quarter. Right. So why foreign trade data? Because if you know what we import the most in this country, then you pretty much should have an idea of maybe where the opportunities are. Or if you're not looking for opportunities and just looking for, maybe just to educate yourself, then I would explain to you what we import the most and like where we spend most of our hard-earned dollars importing stuff. This is actually trade, so these are like goods, not services. We spend a ton of cash, ton of dollars, paying for foreign services, but we're talking about trade today, right? So which is mostly goods, like physical goods that you can hold on to. So first of all, this is Nigeria's total imports over the last okay, so I'm just gonna do this so that you can flow with my pointer. All right, so total imports over the last is this 6 years? Yeah, since 2014. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. As you can see, we've gone from spending 7 trillion on imports to a whopping 20 trillion, 19.9 trillion on imports alone in this country. It's crazy, right? After everything that the government has been trying to do to get us to curb imports, it seems like we're spending a lot more naira importing things. This is basically almost 3 times what we were doing in 2014. A lot of this also has to do with exchange rate. Because if you all recall, sometime around here, we had a massive devaluation. We also had one, sometime in 2014, late 2014 and 2015. And then, but the massive one was 2017, when we went from like 197 to 360. That was technically official rates. But then, rather than still go down, you can see 2018 went straight up to 13 trillion, and then 2016 17 trillion, and 20 trillion in 2020, 19.9 trillion. That's technically 20 trillion. It's likely going to be a lot more in 2021 from my estimates. Let's also remember that 2020 was the year where we had the pandemic, so you would think that import numbers will be slightly lower than what it was in 2019, but obviously isn't at all. So our import bill has risen over the years, and let's remember that we had the 41 banned items all through this period. Yet, this is how much we're spending on imports. I'm gonna try and explain the breakdown, right? So that you guys can basically see the things that we spend a lot of our money on importing, right? So what's gulping imports? So over this period as well, I did an analysis and it was obvious it was machinery and transport and equipment. So this here, 29 trillion is actually transportation. So the things that we import for transportation purposes. So whether is mostly passenger transportation like buses, rails, trains, some of these trains that you're seeing, aircraft, if we buy aircraft, transportation basically and their parts, 29 trillion over the last 7 years. That's what we spent. Next is fuel, 17.2 trillion, minerals and fuel. I'm going to give you the breakdown of each of these ones, at least the major ones at some point. Chemical and related products, 11.3 trillion. Food and live animals, 10 trillion naira. Yes, on food and live animals. That's what we spend on food. Things that perhaps maybe we can probably do, make here ourselves. And then manufactured goods, 8.4 trillion. So this is basically what gobs most of our imports in terms of this is imports, not exports. I might just correct that right away. Or gobs most of our imports. Yep. These things does happen sometimes. Imports. Yep. There you go. Right. So yeah. So that's it. Now we go to the breakdown, machinery and transport equipment. So I looked at the data as well, and it was interesting how much money we spend on transports and equipment. This is not like any other type of equipment. This is equipment that relates to transportation sector. So whether it's rail, whether it's cars, whether it's buses, whether it's airplanes, anything that's got to do with transportation. At least that's my understanding of what this means, and it's incredibly huge. Look at it. In terms of this color here, it's a passenger motor cars, 372 billion naira in 2018, and then it went to 962 billion in 2019, went to 8 trillion in 2020, and this year so far we are on 600 billion, and this is like the first half of this year. So we are on track to do at least 1.2 trillion at the minimum. I actually think it might be more by the time the year ends, but that's where we are today on passenger motor cars. So that's like buses, transportation, and things like that. Then on industrial, slightly lower, 107 billion, but it went up to 420 billion, right? So almost tripling, same trajectory with passenger motor cars, and then kind of dropped in 2020. But already you can see where we are in 2021, 357 billion naira. So first half of the year, we've basically topped what we did in 2020. Incredible stuff. Then you have non-industrial equipment. That as well is rising. It's gone from 224 billion a few years ago, just about 247 billion first half of this year. So likely to double these figures and likely to beat what you did in 2020. Right now, parts and accessories, because I mean, if you're importing transportation equipment, you definitely would also import parts and accessories. So 371 billion in 2018, and then 636 billion in 2019. It dropped in 2020, perhaps because of the pandemic, but it's picking up again in 2021, albeit slightly lower, but it's picking up. So as you can see, the culprit here is passenger motor cars. That is basically how the National Bureau of Statistics classifies it, passenger motor cars. Now I don't know whether this is just buses or if it includes trains, but I think passenger motor cars is basically just vehicles like buses and maybe some of all these BRT buses you see and all that. 8 trillion around the country. I mean, vehicular passenger road transportation is huge in this country, and so I'm not surprised that we're doing this kind of numbers. And you ask yourself, isn't this something that maybe we can do like locally? We should. I would have thought that the government would have maybe been serious about vehicle assembly for transportation, for transportation vehicles, passenger motor cars, rather than for regular passenger cars that most of us, regular cars or saloon cars, personal cars that a lot of us use. Because if we're spending this kind of money on, passenger motor cars, I think that we can move a lot of it. We can save a lot of money if we were assembling a lot of the buses locally. I remember when I was in university, we were using Anamco vehicles back then, and they were assembled, I think, somewhere in Enugu or something, and then somewhere in the north as well. Perhaps maybe we need to go back to that period, and that will save us some money. So let's just move on to the next item. So motor spirit, this year is just fuel, guys, fuel, and see how much we spent on fuel. 2.95 trillion in 2018, and then it dropped to 1.7 trillion in 2019, gone up again to 2 trillion in 2020, despite the fact that we didn't have a lot of movement in 2020, at least for like 2-3 months, because of COVID-19 pandemic. But we're already on 1.4 trillion in 2021, and this is already looking like we might hit 3 trillion, similar to what we did in 2018, and we might hit that number in 2021. Incredible stuff. So this here is one of the reasons why you can see the pressure that we have on our exchange rate, and kind of things that we import money, that we spend money importing. So who knows, maybe by the time Dangote refinery comes on stream, a lot of this money won't be going out, but probably be going to that company. So you can imagine the kind of opportunities that Dangote refinery has when it does come on stream, because a huge chunk of these outflows would basically be redirected to that refinery and any other refinery that might come on stream within that period. And that's really what I like about local production, local manufacturing, because if we do manufacture our own things, then, or at least refine our own petrol, then a lot of all this cash that we spend abroad, we won't really spend it. Removal of fuel subsidy should also help. If we do remove for subsidy and stop subsidizing it, then a lot of people think that these numbers might drop, because some people think it's actually quite inflated, right? Things are really inflated since we spend so much money importing this stuff. There's probably a lot of inefficiencies in there. I remember what they said, a lot of the imports that come in here probably get smuggled out of this country, but then we do reporting in here as some kind of import. So maybe this is also an opportunity at some point if the government really gets serious about this subsidy play. So next thing here is food import. We import a lot of food already. I mentioned it earlier, but let's look at the breakdown. So the NBS breaks down foods into two categories. So one is processed food, and the other is unprocessed food, or I think primary food, or so like they call it. So in terms of processed food, broken down, we get into processed food for industry, and then the one that household consumers use. So I guess maybe like your canned food, or maybe like your bottled drinks. So those are basically processed household consumption food. So let's look at processed household consumption food, and that's what this bar here you have in orange. Guys, check this out: 359.5 billion naira, right? In 2018, jumped to 444 billion, skyrocketed to 686 billion, and is looking like it's on track to do 8 trillion this year. Mad. So because we had 508.5 billion already this year, so looking like we might be hitting 1 trillion. Guys, these are things that ordinarily we should be able to make here. So it's just crazy that a lot of the processed food, household consuming foods, we do import them. So that's just crazy stuff. Anyway, we'll move to processed industry. So industry is processed food as well, but used for industrial purposes, and most of these things find their way as inputs into some of the final goods that are made here. So that has also been on the rise as well. I'm not really clear why it's this way, but something tells me it's also because we've seen a lot of local manufacturing in the food space of recent. But despite having a lot of local manufacturing in the food space, a lot of their input actually comes from abroad. Basically import those things as well. So whether it is the guys making bottled drinks, or whether it's the guys trying to make processed food, they still have a little bit of that industrial component that is processed that they still feed into their food. I might be wrong, but that's sort of like what I think. But look at this number, quite huge, and we're on track to do $1 trillion as well in 2021. These figures here, remember, is year to date 2021, so that is just the first 2 quarters of the year, which is basically 6 months. So is this where perhaps an opportunity there for someone? I should think so. This is a huge market. I mean, think about it. Combined processed food alone is over $1 trillion in terms of what we import. Incredible money, right? That's like $2 billion using parallel market exchange rate, or at least 2 point something billion dollars if it's the official exchange rate. Now, primary food. So I'm guessing these are food that is not processed. This one is even a lot more. So let's look at the industrial one. 432 billion, and then 471 billion in 2019, and then 800 billion in 2020. 799, almost 800 billion. On track to do 1.2 billion this year. Remember, this is year to date, so on track to do 1.2 billion, likely going to double if you were to analyze it. And then for primary household consumption, that has sort of steadied, but obviously going to beat what we had last year. So guys, in terms of food, again, we are spending a lot of money importing processed and unprocessed food in this country. What are we going to do about it? I don't know. Like, it's kind of have industries that can bring this in, or that can do this locally rather than bringing it in. Right. So consumer goods. So this is basically also broken down into three buckets: durable goods, semi-durable goods, and non-durable goods. All right, so I try to put some definitions here. So durable goods are like your electronics, things that last beyond 3 years, things that you can use in your computers will fall into this as well. So these are durable goods. Now, non-durable goods are goods that don't last more than 3 years. So maybe like your liquid soap, like your washers and things like that, things that typically have very short expiry date, 2 years and 3 years. Even medicine sometimes that you bring in, these are like non-durable goods. And then you have semi-durable goods that you can reuse and reuse them, but not solid stuff. So maybe like clothes, jewelry, ornaments. Those are your typical semi-durable goods. So now that I've explained it, let's now look at what the data tells us. So for durable goods, you can see that we sort of like have had this under a bit of control of late. You can see where the numbers are just slightly over $300 billion naira, rather, in terms of what we're doing here. You can see slightly just before 200 billion here, likely to hit 400 billion by the end of the year, right? And then for semi-durable goods as well, not that much in terms of import, and then but non-durable goods, you see still going up, right? About to hit $1 trillion year to date already. So this is likely going to be hitting 1.8 trillion or thereabouts. So it's an incredible amount of money we spend importing non-durable goods. This number here, this one here, it just has to drop. I just don't see how this is going to be sustained. Again, this is also huge opportunity for people, because if jewelry and clothes and ornaments are in this bucket, then there's just a lot of it locally that I think that we can do. So for people who think they can compete here, now I guess this is good opportunities for them. So consumer goods, that's basically what we spend. Now industrial and capital goods, this is an interesting one, because this is basically a lot of the stuff that industries use. Huge manufacturing companies, these are the kind of things that they spend, and this is actually where we spend a lot of our money importing stuff, right? So let's get to it. Blue represents primary industrial supplies, orange represents processed industrial supplies, and then the gray one here, dark gray, is basically capital goods, and then yellow, it's parts and accessories. So industrial goods industrial supplies refer to raw material inputs, primary and processed, that are used as input for manufacture of goods and services. So basically used as an input to manufacture goods and services. Now capital goods are like the machinery and the tools that they actually use to, like the machinery that you put the inputs into and it makes the other stuff to do things. So those are like huge industrial equipment. So obviously these are not things that we do here, except for maybe small factories that may fabricate their own, but we don't do these things here. And so that's why you see for primary industrial supplies, these ones I think we have some kind of competitive edge because the number of things here that we can source at some scale. And perhaps also because manufacturing is not so huge yet in Nigeria, so this is why this number is still slightly low. But when you move to processed industrial supplies, you see processed means that the thing is basically done, like the input is almost done, right? So all you need to do is just bring it in here and then couple or just use it to assemble something. 2.3 trillion in 2018, 2.9 in 3.7 rather in 2019, 4.9 in 2020, and 3.2 in 2021 so far. So this is likely going to be hitting 6 point something trillion this year at this rate if you analyze it. Incredible stuff. Now you go to capital goods, right? So machinery, we import a lot of it. So think of a lot of all the industrial stuffs going on in the country today, whether it's the railway, the roads that they are building, even the Dangote refinery, a lot of the manufacturing companies that are expanding, they're trying to scale. These guys are all demanding a huge chunk of the import bill that Nigeria has. So going from 3 trillion in 2018 to 4.3 trillion in 2019, dipped because of COVID-19 to 3.7 trillion, I guess. But as you can see, it's basically likely going to double in 2021. It's going to hit 5 trillion, not double, at least over 5 trillion in 2021 at the rate that it is going. So as you can see, capital goods and processed goods are eating up a lot of the money we have in this country. A lot of our import bills going to capital and processed goods. Parts and accessories are still there. Quite a huge number here in 2020, considering that it was, we had a lockdown. 1.4 trillion, huge amount, and then 1 trillion. So it kind of looks like maybe this is where the government needs to come in, because if we had very solid a policy for industrialization of the country, then maybe Nigeria can be some kind of manufacturing hub, and then a lot of these things can be done locally rather than have them imported. I think it's something that we can do here. We don't have the expertise, we don't have the competency, I think, to really compete here, but we do have natural resources, and we also have you have the population. So all we just need is the right government incentives that can have people come in here and create industrial villages, industrial centers, industrial clusters, and we can start to do this here. But at the moment, we don't have it, and that is why you see huge import bill, from this side of the economy here. So finally, I think I'm doing this in just under 30 minutes. So Nigeria's heavy reliance on imports is a major factor that is bearing down on exchange rates. A lot of these imports might not be replaced locally, but there's still an opportunity for people to key in. Look, like I said earlier, there is no way that we can continue to import every single thing that we've always imported with the kind of exchange rate that we have now. I just don't see that happening. It's going away from us. So people would have to look inwards and find strategic ways of providing some of the local inputs or some of the local products that Nigerians consume. It's just needs to happen, because with 200 million people, how many things do you want to import? So there's just a huge market here for local people to serve, and we've got to probably just dig deep and figure out how to meet that demand. So this is it for today. My first facts behind the figures. I hope that I was able to explain Nigeria's foreign trade to you. Forgive me if maybe this didn't go as well as you would have wanted. It's my first time. Perhaps probably do better at the next session. So if there's anything you want me to talk about as well, any facts behind the figures you want me to reveal, hit me up, let me know. Perhaps the guys at Nairametrics, the good guys at Nairametrics, will put together another slide that I can speak to as well. So that is it, guys. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.